At the time I was arrested, I had no idea it would turn into this. It was just a day like any other day. The only thing that made it significant was that the masses of the people joined in. Rosa Parks, February 4th, 1913 to October 24th, 2005, was an African American civil rights activist who the U.S. Congress called the First Lady of Civil Rights and the Mother of the Freedom Movement. Rosa Parks was born in Tuskegee, Alabama on February 4th, 1913 to James McCully and Leona Edwards, a carpenter and a teacher. Parks' great-grandfather was a Scottish Irishman. She was small, even for a child, and she suffered poor health and had chronic tonsillitis. When her parents separated, she moved with her mother to Pine Level, just outside Montgomery, Alabama. There she grew up on a farm with her grandparents' mother and younger brother, Sylvester, and began her lifelong membership in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She attended rural schools until the age of 11, later becoming a student in the industrial schools for girls in Montgomery, where she took an academic and vocational courses. Afterwards, she went on to a laboratory school set up by the Alabama State Teachers College for African Americans for secondary education, but was forced to drop out to care for her grandmother and later for her mother after they became ill.
Under Jim Crow laws, black and white people were separated in almost each and every aspect of daily life in the South, including public transportation. Bus and train companies did not provide separate vehicles for the different races, but did enforce seating policies that enforced separate sections for black and whites. School bus transportation was unavailable in any form for black school children in the South. It was seen as a privilege for white children. Mrs. Parks remembers going to elementary school in Pine Level, where school buses took white students to their new school and black students had to walk to theirs. Parks once said,
I'd see the bus pass every day, but to me, that was just a way of life. We had no choice but to accept what was the custom. The bus was among the first ways I realized there was a black world and a white world, but they were separated by a very fine line.
Although Parks did mention a lot of ways to avoid tension, her situation made it impossible to ignore racism. When the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, marched down the street in front of her house, Parks recalls upon the very distinct intention her grandfather had while guarding the front door with a shotgun. The Montgomery Industrial School, founded and staffed by white Northerners with black children, was burned twice by arsonists, and its faculty was ostracized by white community.
After a day at work at Montgomery Fair Department Store, Parks hopped on the Cleveland Avenue bus at around 6 o'clock in the evening, Thursday, December 1st, 1955, in downtown Montgomery. She paid her bus fee and sat in an empty seat in the first row of the back seats reserved for blacks in the colored section, which was near the middle of the bus and directly behind the 10 seats reserved for white passengers. When getting on the bus at first, she had not noticed that the bus driver was the same man, James F. Blake, who had left her in the rain in 1943. As the bus traveled along its regular route, all the white-only seats in the bus filled up. The bus reached the third stop in the front of the Empire Theater, and several white passengers boarded. In 1900, Montgomery had passed a city ordinance for the purpose of segregating passengers by race. Conductors were given the power to assign seats to accomplish that purpose. However, no passengers would be required to move or give up their seat and stand if the bus was crowded and no other seats were available. Eventually, with bias and racial tension in full reign of these conductors, they adopted the practice of requiring black riders to move whenever there were no white-only seats left. So, following standard practice, bus driver Blake noticed that the front of the bus was filled with white passengers and 2 or 3 white men were standing. He moved the colored section sign behind Parks and demanded that 4 black people give up their seats in the middle section so that the white passengers could sit. Years later, in recalling the events of the day, Parks
When that white driver stepped back toward us, when he waved his hand and ordered us up and out of our seats, I felt a determination cover my body like a quilt on a chilly winter night.
By Parks' account, Blake said, "Y'all better make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats." 3 of them complained.
The driver wanted us to stand up, the 4 of us. We didn't move at the beginning, but he says, "Let me back, let me have these seats." And the other 3 people move, but I didn't. The black man sitting next to her gave up his seat. Parks moved, but toward the window seat. She did not get up to move to the newly repositioned colored section. Blake then said, "Why don't you stand up? Why don't you stand up right now?" Parks responded, "I don't think I should have, or I should have, to stand up." Blake called the police to arrest Parks. When recalling the incident for Eyes on the Prize, a 1987 public television series on the civil rights movement, Parks said, "When he saw me still sitting, he asked if I was going to stand up. He was like, up." I just remember it was like, up. And I said, "No, I'm not." I remember it every day of my life. I said, "No, I'm not," right to his white face. And he said, "Well, if you don't stand up, I'm going to have to call the police and have you arrested." I said, "You may do that, sir."
During a 1956 radio interview with Sidney Rogers in West Oakland several months after her arrest, when asked why she had decided not to vacate her bus seat, Rosa Parks said,
"I would have to know for once and for all what rights I had as a human being and as a citizen."
and that is the story of Rosa Parks.
Get in the back of the bus.